About that time. You know what we call it? Tuesday. Tuesday Reviews Day.
Hey, I like that.
Cool.
So Joshua,
Mike.
last night we watched a movie.
We did.
We went and saw Richard Jewell.
Richard Jewell.
Richard Jewell, a goddamn hero, which is what you said when the title came up.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's basically what it is. It's a movie venerating a hero who...
About whether or not he is a hero.
Right. His legacy had been tarnished. Clint Eastwood is here to set the record straight.
Right. This is one of those rare scenarios where I read up on this like years ago, like the actual story before there was even a movie made about it.
Yeah.
So when I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, I know like about this, and I know like what was going to unfold. I was just like ready to see it portrayed,
right?
You know, in this medium. So that was cool.
Was that a late night on Wikipedia?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably part of the Wikipedia train, right?
Yeah, no, it's, let's start with like the story. I mean, it's a true story. How do you think they did showcasing it?
I mean, compared to what I read, it kind of followed along, right? So
it's, although it is based on a true story, the way that it's told, is still engrossing.
It's entertaining. It grabs your attention,
right?
Even if you know the ending.
Right. How do you think Paul Walter Hauser did?
I mean, for an unknown that, like, you know, kind of similar to like Knives Out. Never heard of this person. They're the center of the movie. I didn't have any like fault with. I felt like it was believable. Like it's hard to add depth to like such a simple character, right? One focus, right? He just wants to like do his job and do the right thing. So it's hard to like add a lot of depth to that.
Right.
So it's kind of like you work with what you got.
Right.
And I feel like he did what he could have done with it.
And I mean, he did have his moments of like, although he was kind of one-dimensional, like he had that like breakdown with Sam Rockwell's character where he's like, I am this like simple guy that has this simple mission.
Sure. And
I'm not what everyone else is you know, saying that I am.
Sure.
So like I thought he did that really well. You had Kathy Bates, which is like auto win, just like
she's gonna be good at whatever.
Right. She's the perfect mama.
Yeah, Meryl Streep. It's kind of like a Meryl Streep thing, right?
Yeah.
Anything she's in,
just like
she's
gold.
Gonna slay it.
Yeah. Everyone else was good, but
you expect them to be in. Yeah. That's the thing.
Those two were the best.
I expect to enjoy Jon Hamm. I expect to enjoy Olivia Wilde. Right. Sam Rockwell, I wasn't as familiar with, but almost like a comedic relief type thing.
Yeah, there was definitely some funny parts for sure.
Otherwise, this movie could get way too serious, way too quick.
Right.
So it's good to have that breakout. But yeah, like you said about Paul, like this is going to be big for him exposure-wise.
Yeah.
And like well-earned, clearly.
Right. Some of the dialogue was like a little bit wooden, a little formulaic with basically with the law enforcement and the media stuff when they were like setting the perimeter and there's like, who's got jurisdiction here?
Right.
And like, it's just like Jon Hamm comes up and he's like, oh, you cocksuckers can get out of here. I'm the FBI.
Right.
But Clint Eastwood is like, he's like Hemingway where he's like minimalist. Everything's just done really well. The few times that he does like decide to add like flourishy type stuff, done well. The one negative thing I would say about the cast, but it was more so the character.
Hit me with the criticisms, Mike.
Yeah, it was Olivia Wilde's character. So her character is like a real person. She was named after the real person, and they portray her in a very negative light.
Sure. They
could have easily just like given her a fake name, and they would have avoided all that.
Yeah.
Because Jon Hamm's character is a made-up FBI agent that is based on real agents. Basically, anyone that's like at least partially a villain in the movie is a real person that they like either changed the name to or changed it around. Her one character who is like plays this like sleazy reporter.
Literally,
yeah. They like drag this lady's name through the dirt, and she's like a real person who actually died not so long ago. So that was like a pretty poor creative choice.
When they tried, like at the press conference, when they tried to make her look like have empathy.
The tear rolling down her
eye.
eye.
I was like, that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Like, you imagine, like, if we're going to the RL for a second here, somebody in that type of role, in that type of business, like, to the grindstone, like, no emotion.
Right.
Like, by the book, and there's no way that it's going to change.
Which she was all the way up to that point.
Exactly.
Too.
So I was like, like...
So I thought her characterization was weak.
Yeah.
And the most one-dimensional.
Yeah. And
that was probably the biggest flaw, I would say, with the movie.
Like, I expected the cinematography to be good as far as, like, the look of... what's like the darker sort of like, not grainy, but you know what I mean, like that kind of feel. Right. It's obviously not light and upbeat, so it's got a little like darker, like kind of look to it, which I appreciate. That's kind of my cup of tea, so I gravitated towards that. Right. And then like you had mentioned, everything was it's smooth, right? Right. You know, there's no like crazy jump cuts or shaky cam nonsense, so that was good. And the entire scene of the bomb scare itself was just like really well done. Yeah. That was, even though true story, you know what happens, I was still like on the edge of my seat for that whole sequence. Right. Because even if you know like the result of something, it's sort of like that build up, right? Right. It grabs your attention, it holds you in. You're like, oh, when's it gonna happen? Because you already know what's gonna happen. So there's just these different beats with like him tracking that other guy who actually did just have beer in his backpack. Sure. And then like, you know, the kids are messing around behind the stage. It's those gotchas. Yeah. You know, it's like, oh, he's on it. Oh wait, no, he's not. And then you're like, you know it's coming. I don't know, I like that. Yeah, you're just waiting for it. That gives you that like, that action, but it's not in the scheme of like action. There's not like gunfights or car chases. Right. It's like a pretty simple event. Right. But the way that it's shot and delivered, it just like ropes you in. Yeah, for sure. So, JT. Mike D. What would you give, I wanted to say Knives Out. What would you give Richard Jewell on a rating of 0 to 10 jars? I'm going to give it a 9. 9. All right. The style of like the way that it's shot, presented, ropes you in, even though you know what's going to happen. I feel like the performances were solid, the cast was solid. Yeah. Story, they didn't have to write it really. They had to sprinkle a little bit of detail in that might not have happened, but it was already kind of written. But like you said, there was some lack of character development a little bit here and there. It didn't feel totally rounded. Right. Some of them were one-dimensional. So I'm gonna drop a point for that, but otherwise, like, it's tough for me to get too critical because I enjoyed the movie. I would give it a great 8. I'd give it an 8 for sure. The thing that really brings it up from a 7 to an 8 for me is Kathy Bates and Paul Walter Hauser. Their performances as mother and son were just... It's a good dynamic too, right? Phenomenal, yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah. So we end up 8.5. In the middle, 8.5. I think that's a solid rating for Richard Jewell. I'd say so. Who would you recommend go see this film? Anybody who's into, obviously, movies that are based on true events, right? Yeah. So I don't know how much of it was made up because I read about it so long ago, but I'm assuming most of it's pretty accurate. Clint Eastwood fans, clearly. Yeah. Right? People who are a fan of like a darker tone movie. Serious, little bit of comedic relief. Definitely, there's like good action sequences that really keep your interest. Right. I didn't feel like, because the runtime was longer than 2 hours, right? If it wasn't, it was around there, yeah. I didn't feel that it was that long. Yeah. When I checked the time, like, oh man, it's already been 2 hours. Like, the time went by. And that's how you know it's a good watch, so. Yeah. Anybody who wants to really, like, turn their brain off and get involved in a story for 2 hours, and it's not, like, anything, like, too crazy, light and upbeat. Right. Check it out. I would say anyone that likes the TV shows of, like, anything police procedural or any of those, like, docudramas about like murderers or anything like that, true crime stuff. Sure. Like a 48 Hours type thing? Yeah, they should go check it out. It actually hasn't done that well in the box office so far. Interesting. It's like actually really bad at the box office so far. So hopefully through word of mouth, you know, people will hear that it's actually a really good movie and go check it out. It feels polished, which makes the viewing experience way better than some like vomit cam nonsense. One thing that I really liked was like intercutting with like the real news stories and
the events of the Olympics. So like when Sam Rockwell's character, the lawyer, was retracing the steps to see if he could make it to the phone and plant the bomb at the same time, it would intercut with the race, setting the world record. That was cool.
That was a nice pacing touch.
My favorite scene was, so like they take all of their stuff for evidence. They take all his guns. They take Mama's Disney tapes that she babysits with.
Yeah.
They take everything. And at the end of the movie, once he's been exonerated, they give it all back. And
they just kind of leave it in the middle
they
of the
just
floor,
leave it. She like goes through it and she like picks up this Tupperware, and there's, you know, I forget what number, but like 38. You know, evidence, and she like, you know, tries to rub it off, and it's permanent.
Sure. And
it's just like kind of like a metaphor for, okay, like you've gone through all this terrible stuff, you know, you came out on the other side of it, but there's always going to be that like black mark. No matter what, you know, history will always remember Richard Jewell as a hero, but as the guy who was like investigated as a suspect in this bombing.
I feel like it's a good metaphor for their lives are like permanently affected.
Right.
Going back to the marker, right?
Yeah. Their stories will never like be able to outlive this like main point.
Throughout the whole movie, when he's being not convicted but accused of being the bomber, like obviously he's upset by it, but he wasn't vocal, right? Which is why his lawyer kept like, why aren't you upset? Why aren't you angry or showing emotion? And then the one thing that he's vocal and passionate about confirming isn't true is the idea that he was homosexual.
Yeah.
In his soul,
right.
It was like the worst thing that somebody could have said about him. And he was like, I'm definitely not homosexual.
Right.
Right? Like, he would rather convince people that he's not gay than the idea that he could have been the bomber.
Right.
And I thought that was entertaining.
How did you feel about, like, the time frame, like, as it goes by day to day, it kind of, like, all blended together?
Yeah.
And then it finally said, like, you know, 88 days after his accusation or whatever.
Yeah, that was different.
Like, everything before then, it was like, I feel like maybe it would have been better if they said, like, you know, 3 days after accusation, a week, you know, however long he's been in this terrible journey that he had to go on. But at the same time, not having that kind of, like, made you feel that, like, whirlwind of, like, this lost sense of time, which is kind of
which is probably how they felt, right?
Yeah, which is exactly what they were experiencing. They were just, their lives had been ripped away from them, and it was just replaced by all these accusations and being hounded by the press, and like it just cut to like the day where he gets the letter saying that he's no longer a suspect. It's Clint Eastwood saying, "This man's a goddamn hero, right, and you ought to know it."
And now we know.
And now we know.
Common question.
Which today is about the man, the myth, the legend, Clint Eastwood. We've talked about him at length, about how he's one of the best directors of all time. So I want to know, what's your favorite Clint Eastwood movie that Clint Eastwood is not in?
Oh Lord, he wasn't an American Sniper, right?
He was not.
Okay.
He was as a cameo as a churchgoer, but I will allow you that. I'll allow you that.
I was way more emotionally invested in American Sniper than Richard Jewell.
Okay.
So I would probably lean toward that.
Okay. American Sniper, Bradley Cooper.
You got it.
I would go Changeling. Have you seen Changeling?
Yeah.
That one is also about a person who was lied to and manipulated by authority, and like Clint Eastwood wanted to tell her story.
Sure. And
it's also like deeply affecting and extremely well told, and the way that Clint Eastwood shoots his movies just very direct and like just very engrossing. And so that story really, really stuck with me over the years, so I would go Changeling. Tell us what your favorite Clint Eastwood movie is that Clint Eastwood was not in.
Appreciate you watching. Tune in next week for a little extra jam.
Next week we're going to be watching, it's a year.
1917.
1917. I think that's good,
No,
right?
we're going to end it there. Okay, cool.